Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Welcome to today's Grey Market Blast, where myself and the glamorous with a capital G, Angie Setzer, will be providing you with a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before we do, and before Angie tells us everything we need to know, I'll get the legals out the way. Nothing discussed on the Spaces session constitutes trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed Angie Setzer. Angie, how are you, my love?
I'm doing good. I feel bad because you don't even know you're catching strays over here on Twitter right now. So,
Really?
no, not at all. I don't know what we're talking about. So happy Thursday. Almost said Friday. Did you hear that? Maybe it did sound like I was going to say effing Thursday, which also feels like it would fit, but, happy Thursday. Lots to talk about today. How are you this morning, by the way?
I'm very well.
Afternoon, anyway.
Afternoon.
Sorry.
I'm sitting in my usual office. Lovely little beer in front of me. Going to hopefully see the lovely Mr. Michael Brown for a pint later on if he's
Look
going to.
at that. I heard he
If
was
he,
quadruple booked, so you might be stuck. So let's
well,
dive in.
I'm a bit of a face though, Angie. You know, he'll make
That
an
is
effort.
true. It is true. I think I said, I listened to the Morning Blast this morning, so I'm not a stalker, I promise. But, in any event, welcome guys. Happy Thursday, as I said. Lots to talk about. I think really just I'm kind of going to start with like diving in head first in this China update. Cause I feel like it's been a minute since we've been like, yo, what up with China? Right? And so there's a lot, it hasn't really been a minute, but there's a lot going on. We're still waiting on Trump to say yay or nay to the extension, right? China's basically said, hey, we've got this extension put together. All is well. The Trump team has said we got this extension put together, but we're waiting for the Donald to say yay or nay. And so he was supposed to be briefed yesterday. I think we all thought maybe we'd see some sort of confirmation or something like that. Didn't really get it. But it is interesting, at least in my opinion, to note, that China, like I said, is saying, yeah, we got that done. We're all taken care of on that side. But then not only that, you're seeing some interesting positive sentiment towards the U.S., or at least towards this meeting and the shift in the negotiations, or at least they're indicating that there's been a shift in negotiations to a more, respective tone, if you could say. And so that's one of those things that, I kind of found interesting. Like you've had it in China's People Daily and in, what's the other one? You know, the other one, where it was both kind of similar messaging and just positive. But on the flip side, of course, we still haven't heard yay or nay from Trump, like I said. And we have this whole India penalty thing for doing business with, Russia, knowing that China is very actively doing business with Russia. And we also saw, some indications of some, potential hiccups in the little relationship that we have here with the backdoor, safety issues, or whatever you want to call it, with the H2O chip. We did see that with NVIDIA today. China's kind of like, wait a minute, are you tracking us? Are you going to be paying attention to what we're doing on this backside with this chip? And that's kind of like the linchpin, if you will, that's holding the deal together to a certain extent is, China is going to need these chips. China needs a couple other things from the U.S. That was one of the deals that, or, you've seen the administration say that this was part of the truce. And so just a couple little roadblocks or speed bumps, perhaps, if, when it comes to what does that look like, or what is that relationship? What do we see happen there as we move forward? We did see what Politburo come out or have their meeting, and really didn't bring out any sort of big announcement. Like, we're not doing helicopter money, at least at this point, from the looks of it. And everyone's been disappointed with China's stimulus all year. And that just continues currently. You saw commodities kind of fall
And
off a little bit. Yes.
what's my
All
favourite?
fart, no poo.
There we go.
Lots of promises, no delivery. That, my friends, is China. And so that's where we're at. Like, we're a little depressed about that, which, as you should be, get a probiotic in your diet. So, in addition to that, we're still seeing extreme weather in China too. That has my attention. Like, we've got flooding in parts of the country, more of a smaller part, kind of right around that Beijing area and to some of the points north. But the friends that I'm talking to, or the folks that I'm talking to that are in, kind of more in touch with what's going on the ground, say it's the big heat with the little rain, that's causing some of the biggest worries. There's 6 regions currently that have been kind of marked by China's government as, potentially problematic. And most of them, or I think, the bulk of them, are in areas where, you have a decent amount of grain production. And so what was it? I wanted to kind of share this with you guys because I thought you'd see it would be interesting. There's 3 different provinces, basically, and this is from Satonia Consulting's newsletter yesterday. Good stuff there. If you don't subscribe, think about it. But there's 3 different provinces there that saw 16 to 23 more of these high temperature days, which basically means when the temperature exceeds 95 degrees Fahrenheit, it's a high temperature day. And so these provinces so far this year have seen the most high temperature days since records began in 1961, including 40 weather stations exceeding their historic records. And so that has my attention just because, heat and stuff, especially when it's accompanied with significantly low rainfall. He went on to kind of point out that there's, like I said, 6 different regions, that are showing a significant moisture deficit. They are looking at some rain working its way in with the tropical storm system and some of these other things. But definitely something to pay attention to. And the NVVI data is going to be lagging in a big way on that. And in certain instances too with China, I don't know if it's even anything worth looking at on the FAS website. Other than that, the reserve selling in China has been super slow or really poor. They really haven't seen a significant uptake of corn, imported corn over the last couple of weeks, really, maybe last month. From an overall standpoint, China's basically put 2 million metric tons, or almost 80 million bushels of corn into the pipeline over the last month. The prices had started to rally into June and as we got started into July. And so you kind of had a little bit of a double whammy. They didn't really want corn prices to move higher. We've got margin issues in some parts of the country and things like that. And so they went ahead and released a bunch of corn. Basically, like I said, over the last couple weeks, you're really only seeing a small amount of purchases, 25%. But from an overall standpoint, you saw over half or around half of the corn that was offered taken. The pipeline is currently well supplied, and so it'll be interesting to see as we move closer into harvest, what happens with China's cash prices and kind of what the overall sentiment is. We are seeing soybean purchases continue. Today it was reported that we did see some beans bought for October shipment out of South America. So yesterday I said if we started to see that, or we hadn't seen it yet, so I wasn't really too concerned. We are starting to see it. I'm going to guess it's a couple cargoes here, a couple cargoes there. There's limited supply availability to really, push it too awful far where they completely avoid U.S. beans. But at this point in time, that is one of the bigger stories out there is that China's not buying U.S. beans, and that they're not going to. That's the attitude currently. And so, we're really going to be paying attention to that, but it's probably likely to be hinging on, some of these trade negotiations, ironing out, what does this look like with this penalty? What are we going to do here? Yada, yada, yada. And so yes, China is slow, to add beans or to make bean purchases. But I think, a lot of it's political at this point in time. They're not going to do something until they're told that they can. They obviously go backwards if they buy U.S. beans with the, import tariffs that are in place. And so there is a reason, that we have to be watching that, really, really closely. But from an overall standpoint, I think China's demand still looks pretty decent because their crush margins have been okay and yada, yada, yada. Anything, do you have anything in China on the political?
No.
I can't say politburo. Politburo. It doesn't make sense to me. There's a vowel missing. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think. There was, the only thing I saw was that, soybean, story on Reuters, but you've covered that bit.
Yes. Yep. So it's about what we got. We're obviously just going to continue to watch that. We'd like to see what Trump has to say. He keeps saying that we're close to a China trade deal. So hold on to your hats there. Export sales side of things and just kind of grain flow overall. Just building on that conversation about soybeans, and I posted this today on Twitter, and so I apologize, but I'm going to kind of reiterate it or re-go over it with you. Right now, one of the biggest things that we keep hearing about when it comes to negative sentiment with soybeans is the lack of ability, lack of us being able to build an export book. We're, missing China, obviously, like we just talked about, and you haven't really seen the world end user come in and start aggressively making purchases. When it comes to new crop bean sales, we're around 500,000 metric ton or, 15 million bushel or so below where we were a year ago at this time. One of the things I do want to point out, though, is a year ago at this time, we had plenty of conversation that was very, very similar to this. I'd probably pull you up articles, of worries over China not making purchases, worries over our overall export book being, abysmal. Like, what is it going to look like if we have to chop exports, in half or whatever? Like, there was a lot of gnashing of teeth. I was on Market to Market the first weekend in August of last year, and it was like 2 or 3 different questions about the soybean export book, if I remember correctly. And so one of the things I want to point out is in July of last year, the USDA had that marketing year, the new crop marketing year's export projection at 1825 or 1.825 billion bushels. Everyone was talking about how it needed to be reduced, how it was overstated, yada, yada, yada. We are currently, projected to finish the year with 1.865 billion. So over the process of the marketing year, we've actually added 40 million bushel to our overall export book. And we're currently ahead of the USDA's projected number. We just sold more beans today to put us above that USDA peg. And so I really want to point out, as I say a million times, it's all about grain flows. And as we move forward, you're going to see to where Brazil and Argentina are going to have less available beans. Argentina is probably going to have more available supply than we've seen in years prior, just simply because of the increase in available price to the farmer, yada, yada, yada. So everyone, I feel like, needs to calm down a minute when it comes to all of this talk of reduced exports and things like that, because when you look at the overall who's covered, who's not covered, how many beans are left to buy in the global market, there is still a ton of demand that's going to have to be chopped up. And when it comes to actual grain flows, the rest of the world's going to struggle to be able to source high quality soybeans out of anyone but the U.S. October through the end of January. Plain and simple. Now, could we have people, float on reserves for a while and cut back, on their U.S. purchases because of trade, tension and some of these other things? Sure. But it is important to remember the USDA is already forecasting a 120 million bushel year over year export book cut. That's pretty substantial as it is. And so we really need to, I feel like, pump the brakes on this. Oh, beans need to go to 850 because we're never going to sell them idea. Otherwise though, we did get, big new crop corn sales. I'm almost done. Current pace right now is 3 million metric tons ahead of a year ago last year. And we already were seeing signs of a pretty aggressive export book. Same sort of thing here. Like, we are winning big chunks of demand, October, November, December timeframe, September, October, November, December timeframe. And we really shouldn't be. Like, Brazil just had a massive crop. Everyone was telling you at the end of the summer or in the middle of the summer, beginning of the summer, whatever, how Brazil was going to eat our lunch. They were going to export 40, 50 million metric ton of corn. We were not going to have any sort of opportunity. You're going to see cancellations, yada, yada, yada. We're not. And then after, a number this morning that was bigger than the USDA or what traders were expecting in export sales, we got a chunk of flash sales. So just, if you're listening, be calm, watch this thing as it works its way out, right? There's a lot of conversation I keep talking about where it's like, oh, well, demand is so poor. And I don't know where that is coming from. Now, of course, we're going to get next week. We have more in the way of producer surveys, and supply updates or yield projected updates. I am seeing, some interesting pictures of corn and things making its way into my inbox around the country that, I think, should give some folks pause. Not saying it's a huge deal, but still. And so, we'll see where we head today.
Are we referring to the dreaded P word?
Pollination problems. It's, the old double P.
PP.
Yeah, the old double P. And honestly, like, I still am trying to determine, you know what I mean? Everyone's trying to determine, right? Like, but I do feel like we gotta get to these private estimates and see, especially if they're survey driven. Because, right now for me, if you talk to anyone, yes, there are a handful of farmers out there that are like, yeah, I am better than last year. But, I work with, almost dozens, almost 100 growers from across the country. And I don't have anyone yet that's like, I'm blowing last year out of the water. Like, it is,
right, yeah.
It's probably as good as last year, maybe a couple bushels better. Probably a couple, like my Indiana guys seem to be going backwards, when I talk to them. But, we'll see, but demand remains solid. If we continue to keep prices low, they're just going to continue to cure the low prices eventually. And so, tally ho, let's go.
Awesome. I can only apologise for the background. It seems like the construction workers are at it again. But Angie, thank you so much, as always, for being an absolute rock star. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate you. Whatever you're doing today, stay safe. If you're out in the field, if you're in front of screens, keep it tight. And yeah, we'll see you all tomorrow. Much love.
Have a super good one.